Hi, this is Linda Amen, Amen Arts. Welcome to my world. And today's video is going to be really fun, I think. You're going to love this lesson. I'm calling it All Cracked Up. And what I love about being an artist and the way that artists see things differently is that I was going for a walk the other night, and I just was looking at the sidewalk and went, wow, there are so many different exciting shapes, and it looks like instead of a sidewalk, it looks like it's a hillside or something. So I just took a couple close-up pictures of the sidewalk. In fact, I actually had to go back and get the camera and trace my steps to where I thought these particular cracks were. And one of the things I noticed is we're kind of over in a place that has a lot of old construction, and the old construction has all these cracks and everything, and then a new construction as well. As they're building and coming into the different facilities, the new construction has different kinds of cracks. Then there's concrete and asphalt, and then of course there's natural rock ones, but we're going with a sidewalk. And the other thing is sometimes you see things are growing out of them. Sometimes they have little, small, medium, large little boulders. And of course this is all blown up. The crack was a very small little crack in the concrete of the sidewalk that I was walking on. But I wanted to show you how you can take one of these. In our last lesson, we talked about properties and the way that you're going to be using different kinds of paint. So what we're going to do today is show you how you can do some granulation of your colors so that you can have some of the textural look of what this is just in the natural way that the paint will go down. So the first thing I'm going to do is I want you to, in this course, come up with getting a notebook. Now, I wouldn't have you paint in these notebooks. It's a sketchbook, basically. I want you to get something that's ring bound like this so it will go flat. But I want you to have your art challenges teaching the artist within you. I want this to be a book that you just keep putting more and more information into. So it's used for these courses, and when you come onto the Zoom meetings, you could jot down notes, but it's all in one place. And then when you do one of the challenges, you don't want to actually do it on this. You want to do it on good paper, but you could take a copy of it or something and glue into there. Or if nothing else, you could take your little scrap and cut out the colors you used and just take your good paper, glue it down and say, this is what I did the lilacs in these colors, and then label them. So you just have a book of your information. So today what I want to do is show you that I've got two different ones. I think I'm going to do this one. So I'll set this one aside. And I am going to just do what they call a thumbnail sketch. And I don't always do this, but I do it often enough that I want you to know about it. So I'm going to do it kind of in the same orientation as the actual photograph that I'm using. I will add into your curriculum a couple photographs. I would suggest, though, that you go out and find your own cracks in your sidewalk or someplace. And I'm just going to come through here and just do basic little quick little shapes. And I really love the way this one comes down into the, down vertically. So I'm going to just come in here and just put in some little squiggles. I'm not going to take a lot of time with my thumbnail. You could take longer. I'm just giving you a thought of how you can do a little thumbnail sketch. And then what you're doing with this is you're taking the side of your pencil and you're coming in and you are shading in to where some of those dark areas are so you can see if it's the imagery that you want to do. And I know a lot of artists that do a thumbnail every single time that they're going to do a painting. I think it's a really great idea. I don't always do it. I do it often, but not always. And what it does, and I'm just going to draw lightly here, and just use the side of your pencil. And it just gives you maybe the composition you want to use. So then I come back in and draw a little bit more. Maybe a big rock here, down another one down here. And then I want to fill this in so that it's more of that little shape. I can widen out some things. I can come over to this crack over here. I can come back up here. I can change it. And of course, when I actually do the finished work, see, I've changed this area. you could change it, and you could do a whole lot of these on your page and just come up, and we're going to do more of this kind of thing in other lessons, but I want you to see what that does is starts giving you some value decisions. And one of the reasons I liked this particular crack is because I like the Y that it made. It made this really distinct vertical falling down look. I'm going to come in here and get those rocks smaller by having the shadows bigger. And then you could just, again, play with your values. You can take something out if you want to. But that just gives you some thinking, some patterns. And you could even say, you know, I don't like that there. I want that wider. So you can just come in with your Staedtler Mars eraser. I shook the table a little bit. That's okay. Come in here. And that's not quite so dramatic of the division between here and here. So give some thought that you would do. They're called thumbnails. And you would come and just do a few of those before you start. Now, the next step, you can freehand draw it onto your paper, or you can trace it. There's a lot of ways that you can go about it. I'm going to show you a couple different things. If you take a piece of tracing paper and lay over your rocks, your crack, and just do what we just did in the thumbnail, but maybe change the rocks where you actually want them to be. Maybe the cracks, maybe these are little tiny ones, maybe you put a big one over here. And then you come down and you do the little ones here. And you're just kind of wiggling around. Here's a big one. I'm going to make it more one large one. So you can see I'm changing the composition as I trace it than what's really there. You could actually do what's really there too. It all depends on your comfort level and what you want to do. This is all dark in here, so I'm going to remind myself that's all dark. I can always relay it over this. There's a lot of different ways you can go about it. So there's the start of my drawing. And you would have your image that you can look back at. Either maybe it's on your phone and you're just drawing it from that, or you are doing it on the tracing like this. There's all kinds of ways you can do it. You could also have a second copy of the photograph and just trace it down. I would suggest what you do not want to do. See, that's getting to be pretty interesting. What you don't want to do is take your carbon paper like we've done before and put it down like this and put your watercolor paper underneath, your watercolor paper underneath, trace it down on your original copy. If you do it with your original copy instead of a copy of it, what happens is you put all those lines down and you're covering information that you should see that the pencil line is not there. So either do a second copy, so you have one that you trace straight down. You can just freehand draw it from your thumbnail, or you can use a tracing paper and do it this way, and then you would do this down and you would trace it down on your watercolor paper. So I'll show you one of those methods. All right, so you can see the thumbnail and kind of how I did that. I took a little bit of time off camera and went into my tracing that I did off of here, just did some other little things. So I'm going to lay that down. I'm using a stretched watercolor paper. Another thing, you can look and see how we stretch paper to have it so that after you've done everything and you cut it off the board, it stays flat, ready to frame. So there's a video on that you can check out. I'm going to take a little bit of drafting tape, which is a low tack tape, and I'm just going to hinge this here. I will have some extra space here for testing some colors, but I'm just going to have it, just for convenience sake for videoing, I'm going to have it about the size of the paper that I actually had. Then we talked about you could have a second copy and you could just trace this down. You could freehand draw it like we talked about. Or here's my one that you saw me do and did a little more to it. And this is the carbon graphite paper that is on a video. And you don't want to buy the carbon graphite papers because even though they say they erase, they don't erase well. and it's really difficult to erase and come back when you want to. So what I'm going to do, in fact, I'm going to use a colored pencil so that I can kind of see where I'm going, because otherwise I'm not going to know where I've been. So you could actually use your pattern a number of times by doing maybe a red pencil, color pencil this time to trace down. Maybe next time you would do a different color like a blue or something. So if you take a look, you can hinge this, take it off, and you can see where I'm actually working on that. Looks like I got something on the paper. Oh well, we'll work that out. So I'm going to come down and just draw the basic lines. And again, I'm not going to worry that I'm following the lines exactly, because I'm going to change things as I work. Pretty good drawing. And then I'm going to take my drafting tape and I am going to come across where I believe the edges are. So that's my top edge, where I have a little bit above here for testing colors if I want to. And then I'm going to come with my drafting tape half on, half off. So when I take this off the board, I will have this beautiful white border that I will have exposed, so that there'll be a white, when I cut it off and the paint goes up here, that area will be clean. And when I go to frame it, I don't lose any of my imagery to framing, because I've already planned for that. So there you go. So we're going to talk a little bit about granulating paint. And in the last lesson, the little clue words, we talked about that. So granulation is basically that when you put the water and the paint down, it'll drop little particles down into the paper and look like a textural look. And so it'll leave little bits, sediment or granules is what they call that. And there are, when you look at the chart, you can have all these different things that you can know about, but I'm just going to let you know that what I'm going to do is, just to give me a good basis to start, I'm going to just put one color across the whole thing, so that I've got a start of this whole look, and then I'm going to drop in some things and I can continue to do that. So when you're doing a granulating paint, what you want to remember, I'll do a little scrap paper here. What you want to do is you want to have a fair amount of water and a fair amount of water with some paint, but you don't want to manipulate. So you're going to see I've pulled out into my tray some Payne's Gray M Graham. It's a granule. It granulates. This was Lunar Black with Daniel Smith, and I've got a little bit of Moon Glow, which is a purpley tone that might be kind of fun to put in with Daniel Smith. I'm not guaranteeing I'm doing all those colors, but I'm playing with the idea. And so what you do is you can take and grab the juicy paint, you put it down, and you kind of tickle it in and put it around. And I'll just, rather than brush stroke it, if I kind of move it around like rock and roll, what I will have is those granules will start to show. So you can see, even with the shine on here, there's little particles that are happening. Now, if you fuss, because what I found is it took me years to figure out why I wasn't getting good granular look. And the reason is I'd go, well, here, I want it to work, and I kept doing it. And I basically broke down those granules to where they weren't showing the same as if I'd left them dry naturally and not manipulate. So when you're doing different colors, they will particle different. Your blues work quite often. Ultramarine blues will granulate in all the companies. You've got ones that sound like rocks. I told you that if it sounds like a rock, it might be in the last lesson. So hematite is a rock. So when you do the hematite down, it's going to granulate. So there's all kinds of different ones. You can look at your properties of which ones, but today we're just going to use a couple of them and show you how granulation makes a difference in a painting. So I'm going to take very juicy, and I'm not going to put water first this time, because I don't mind if there's bloom backs or other things. Remember I told you there was a little bit of something splattered on my paper. There's a little bit of red in there, but we'll deal with that. So this is the Payne's Gray, and I'm just going to come across the whole thing in different value ranges and come across so I can still see my pencil line and not worry about it going out. I'm going to manipulate that a little bit. It's not moving very much. It might even have been another acrylic or something else, but no worries. Okay, so now you can see that where I manipulated it more, the granules are not as high, and of course the value would make a difference. I'm going to lift this up. So as I run this across, you can see these granules are higher, and here where I fussed a bit, and it's lighter as well, the granules don't show as much. So actually that's a nice range of things. So while it's wet, because everything is still very wet, I'm going to take a little more Payne's Gray up here because I want to put a little more up here, and maybe a little more down in the corner. And then I'm going to take and infuse a little bit of Lunar Black, just a couple places, and I'm going to kind of rock and roll that. So I have a gray and more of a black tone, and I'm just kind of laying some of it in there so that my background has some variety. I'm going to splatter a little water on there, and then instead of brush stroking, this will give me variation right off the start. This is not always how I do it. This is one way I thought you might enjoy, because you can see the granulation. I just added a little water there. You can see that Lunar Black is a higher granulator, and it's a little darker than your Payne's Gray. That's actually a mixture there. And then here's where it's lighter. So I'm just going to rock it. I'm going to add a little more water right here, just so that I can have that be lighter and not a blob. Okay, so now I've actually got a basis that I feel starts looking a little bit like this idea. I'm not worried about the exact color of that being gray. I'm going to take a little bit of the Payne's Gray, because none of you stopped me, and just splatter. Again, I don't want this so dark that I can't see my pencil lines or my graphite lines that I did. Okay, so I'm going to let that dry. And the thing that I'm going to do is a little trick you should know, that when you do something like this, take, especially when you did the drafting tape, it's holding that edge, take and just push along the edge a piece of paper towel, don't touch your painting, and just take off those edges, because you don't want that running back in unplanned. And then I will let that dry. So let me hold it up. I've got quite a bit. Now the paper is very buckled, and that's because it's very wet. And as that dries, it'll go flat again, because I've got it on a stretched, it's called stretched paper. So I've got it stretched down, and it will also lighten. Remember, watercolor always lightens. Okay, it has dried now, and you can see it's lightened up quite a bit, so I can see all my graphite lines or pencil lines if you did that. You could also do pen and then do all this. I have decided that I can always do some pen later. I love to do that in this kind of thing. But what I'm going to do this time, there's a lot of approaches, and one of the things I do in these lessons is vary up the different things that you can do. So what I'm thinking is, if I establish some of this line where it exposes the rocks, the little pebbles that are up, and the concrete that is up, and I came around and did the darks, that will give me more of the shapes of what I want. So you could do that with all kinds of things. I've decided to just take my Payne's Gray. It is a granulator, so it will stay with the same idea. And I have lots of water here again today so that I keep everything clean. And I'm just going to use a little liner brush. And I am going to, when you use a liner brush, you side load it. So I'm going to side load it so it's fully loaded. It's going to start. You could draw this out very exacting if you want. I'm not going to worry about that. I'm going to take my brush and start drawing in some of the cracks. And when I do that, I can wiggle around the little boulders, or whatever you want to call them. I could wiggle around them so that I start getting them shape. The other thing I'm going to do is not have everything be a hard line, because if you look here, it goes a hard line and then it softens out. So every once in a while, I'll just take a wet brush while it's still, juicy enough to do, and I will soften out an edge here and there. You could do this later too, but do you see what that does? Is it gives a variance right here to even that area to have hard and soft edges. So I'm going to come around, and I'm just going to enjoy the process of shaping in some of the rockish shapes. Some of this I will take a little bit of time with so that you don't have to watch me do every one, but I'll do enough here that you can see the way. I'll probably speed it up and have you watch me in speed dial way. But you can see what's nice about this is a totally synthetic little inexpensive brush. I've got them like at this point in time. They only cost $5. And I am going to juicy out once in a while, drag some of the paint down. And you can see that starts giving me some information. I could even take and drag this one out very light, like there's a little rock there already. I can surround. We've talked about it before, how when you surround something, you are shaping to have it become the item. So right there, and right here, let's do one here too, because nobody stopped me again. If I come out to this outside edge, I have now made, by the surround, two little areas that could be little pebbles. So even though you've got a pattern here, nobody's stopping you from being creative and trying different things. So I'm going to come through and just kind of surround. They call it negative painting, but I think that sounds too negative, so I usually call it surround. And from my thinking, surround is a better word because it reminds me I'm making the shape from what I am laying out there. So here again, I put some waterway out, and I did that. It gave me the opportunity to leave wherever water is, paint's going to go. Wherever I don't put water, it leaves skips. So when I skip, it actually gives me some more variance there. So I'm going to come up here. I've already lost my way. If you get lost, you're a true artist. So I'm a true artist. I get lost a lot. Part of it is because I changed my mind in the pattern. So I'm up here. I'm going to fold this over so I can see it a little bit better. So I'm kind of down on this big rock here that I could come in here. And if you have little bloom backs, which is where the paint kind of oozles out, in something like this, that's a bonus. So don't worry about doing that. You could use variants of colors, but right now I'm giving myself where things are. And even inside that area, I could soften in some of them so they're not all hard. The idea is to kind of play a little bit. I'm going to go real slow, let the camera catch up. There you go. So you can kind of see where I'm at a little more detail. Sometimes the camera can't focus as fast as I paint, so we give it a little opportunity to have time. All right, so you can see as I'm doing this, I'm getting an essence of the shapes of the little boulders that are happening. And you can kind of hop around. The idea is when you're someplace that you understand it, go ahead and put that one in and then come back to somewhere else. You could, like we did here, my tracing paper, you could have filled in with the pencil on the pattern here, all those, and you could have a little bit, erase as you go so you're not painting over pencil line or graphite line, but you could do that so that you know exactly where those darks are and, have a more distinct pattern. But I don't mind kind of finding little boulders and finding little bits. And I'm probably not even, I kind of quit looking at the pattern after a while because you can kind of just think, okay, I want a little one. I want this one to be more flat and more varied. I can take and just put a little bit of water here so it bleeds out a little bit. I can go a little bit here. I can drag some of the paint over. I need to go a little darker here so that I can have that rock be rounded on the bottom. Oh, let's make it flat on the bottom because we can. And then I can come up and I can just kind of keep finding my way. If you want to test something that it's going to be the shape you want, all you have to do is take a pencil and go, I wonder if I want this to be dark. And you could just draw this. And if you get lost and you're just feeling too lost, do this. And then you can say, okay, I want that dark. I think I want to be like this. I like this. See how that's all shaping in to give me the same thing. And then I make sure this is all dry so I don't run into it. But before I would put the actual paint down into that area, I would erase the pencil line. I mean, some people go straight over it with the dark colors. The pencil line disappears under there. But I prefer to have it erased and come back to it. So I'm going to let that dry because I can't erase that close to where I'm at. So I'll come up here. But that will help you in making some of the decisions. All right. So I'm probably going to do about that much. So you can kind of see where we're going. I'm going to just go over that pencil line so you could see it would work because the pencil line, you know, it's dark enough that you're not disturbing, you know, it's not going to peek through. It's not a transparent color where it's going to peek through. I usually erase it though. Or I just play around each of the shapes. But you can see, I'll come out very gently here. Pardon me as we slowly pull it out. All right, look at that. So you're seeing this shapy thing is kind of reminiscent of that. So you saw me kind of go quickly through some of that so you didn't have to watch every little line. And what I would say is I love when things get interpreted. I know that this looks different than this, and I really like that. I like the way that things can be varied. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to take and I just want to bring a little bit of a continuity here. And if I take my great big brush, my big squirrel and synthetic brush, and kind of come along this edge and define, I'm just kind of skipping it around a little bit so that I can, it's kind of like what we did at the beginning, and I'm just bringing in more variance around. And if something bleeds out a little bit, it's going to be okay. Now I'm going to, that was Payne's Gray. Now I'm going to grab the Lunar Black. Remember, the Lunar Black is the one that has the high granulation. So I'm going to come in, you could try different colors. You can even do this in more color tones. I'm just doing it pretty monochromatic with just variances a little bit. Now I'm going to put lots of water here, rinse out well. Because when I went for the walk, what I liked is seeing the concrete had different values and different textures kind of happening. So now what you can see is I have added just a little bit more of what I see of this kind of stuff, and I can add more. One thing I think I'm going to do is take my brush, put it in the Lunar Black, and just like I did before, just kind of splatter. And where it's really wet, it will juicy out, and where it's drier, down here, I'll show you where that's at, pardon me. See that? It's going to be more sparkled, and I can do some of this later. But if I do this kind of over the whole thing where it's really wet that I just had, it will be soft, and where it is drier, it'll be more of the harsh little lines. And that just gives me, we're just playing with texture. And being that it is going with the Lunar Black, it has a little bit more that when it sparkles out and infuses in, see that right there? It's just a little bit more textural. This is going to stay pretty defined because it was dry there. So I like what that's doing. I think that the colors could have a little bit of an interesting color. I think the Moon Glow that I put out earlier, that's a Daniel Smith. I think we'll start introducing a little bit of the Moon Glow. And the Moon Glow is a pretty interesting color in that when it's a granulator, and when you put it down, it's very purple. But depending on how much you manipulate it and how it dries, it can be kind of a purple to almost a blue tone. So you'll see that it particles out some different color tones. And I think that would be a nice addition to this because we've got kind of the grays and the blacks, and a little bit of the Moon Glow might just give kind of an interesting little interest to it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do what is called a dry brush. And what you do is you take your brush and you get it pretty loaded with the paint. And then on scrap paper, you hold it like this, not like this. You actually hold it down like this, and you kind of bring it across the paper until it is kind of dry-like. So when you do that, it will do skips, and that will give me even more texture. Now, I've got some of this pretty wet, so I'm going to have to probably dry it and come back. But I'm going to just do a little bit here where you can see that when I come across with that brush, and again, every time you load it, you need to take it and scrape it off on, hear me? Off on scrap paper so that you don't have too much. But I'm just going to hit a few of those places. And look what that did. See? And that's actually kind of a nice little addition. In fact, I could come over a couple places just on the paper if I want to. And because it's wet in some places and dry in some places, again, I'll get a little variation in there. Today, as I'm looking at this, and I've done a little bit more, I realized that from my photograph, I changed quite a few things that actually I want to go back and have this lighter here. So I'm going to use a little brush that's kind of a scrubber brush. It's very lightweight. It's not going to be rough on the paper. I'm going to take this out of the way. And I'm going to put lots and lots of water over where I want to just soften this and lift a little bit of that out. So right now I'm putting piles and piles of clean water. Then I'm going to get my brush really clean. I'm going to let it sit for at least 10 seconds. And in the 10 seconds that it's sitting, the water will start to go in and the paint will start to lift. And then I'm going to gently scrub it. Gently is the thing. You do not want to damage paper. And then I'm going to take a clean paper towel and I'm going to lift. So I'm just going to gently scrub. You can see it took a lot. Do not go back more than 2 times. This is my second time with more water, letting it sit, getting a clean place on my tissue, letting it sit for a little bit, and then scrubbing. If you keep at it, you will damage the paper. I tightened it up really well so that I can kind of go back with my plan. I widened it out a lot, and then I thought I want to change that a little bit. So I'm going to paint these areas until it's totally bone dry because you don't want to disturb the paper while it's been a little bit manipulated. So if you do it right, you'll have no trouble with continuing on with other areas in the painting and never know that you actually did a correction there. They're black and come through and just do a little bit dark. I'm going to pick up a little of the Payne's Gray too. Remember, the Payne's Gray is also one that will granulate. And if I go between the two, you'll see I get a black and a more gray look. I'll get some variation. But I'm not wetting the paper first, simply because I don't want to disturb what's underneath of the granulation I already got. And here we're going to go back between the two colors. And then I'm going to show you, see that actually pops the rock features out a little more. I'm going to come over that place that I actually did a little correction up here, a little bit more. Going between the two colors. I just picked up a little bit of Moon Glow there. I didn't realize it was on my brush, and it's fine. It's going to be a little bit of a purple tone over there. And again, I'm tickling in so that I'm not getting too manipulative to what was under there beneath again before. Now I'm just going to come in with a fair amount of water, and put some splotches in here, and that will pop this feature out a little bit more. And then while it's wet, because I want to have some of it be invaded a little bit while it's wet, I'm going to take a toothbrush, an old toothbrush, and I am going to load it up with paint. I'll show you here what I'm doing. I'm going to load it up with some Payne's Gray, load it pretty well, maybe a little bit of the other color too. And then I'm going to put head down and pull towards me. And if I pull towards myself, it will splatter to the paper. If I go out, then I will get myself. So because I am doing this while it is wet, it will blend in more than if I did it when it was dry. And I'm going to come back later and do some dry. But if I do this and just keep loading my brush with more paint and splattering down, I'm getting more textural in a couple different ways. That dry, and then show you how I come back in with the dry spots on top. But see right there, it's a little drier, a little bigger. That, to me, starts looking more like some of this stuff. Okay, it's dry now, and I tested a little color down here. I've decided I want to keep it mainly in the look of the grays and cooler kinds of colors, but I want to have a little spot that gives a little focus to it, and usually it would be in the 1/3 to 2/3, so this is kind of half, but I'm going to be bringing you over this way a little bit. So I just kind of tested a couple colors, and I'll give you some thoughts on as I go a little farther here. But the next thing I want to do is you look at the photograph, and look at your reference, and start putting in the areas that you see are a little darker with your Payne's Gray or one of the colors. Like if I fold this over down here and look at this rock, I can come in and get in some of those areas, and it will give it more value changes. And that way I can, and this was looking straight down, so it's not going to have the same shadows as if it was up against, this was looking straight down at the sidewalk. I'm going to soften out some of that. So you can start to see that that right there has some lights and darks in it. So I'm just going to go through, and I interpret things, so I don't have to have them be the same. Some of this would be maybe more exacting that you would do. Some of you would be even more abstracted. But I'm going to put down some darks, have some soft areas where I hit the water to it, have some little skips. Some of the same things we've done in some of our other lessons. But if I come in and do a little bit of this pre-work, then when I come over with the next layer, I'll have some things defined already. So I'm just going to kind of come around and vary the amount. I might have it be a little darker on the bottom here. If you were having a true light source against a building or something, it'd be a little different than when you're looking straight down on it like this, I think. And this is an impression of things, so I'm not having each of them be the same. But already you should start seeing that if you do a light, middle, dark, remember the value things that we do, light, middle, dark areas on each one of these little pebbles, then it would give a roundness or a jaggedness to each of those pieces. So I'm just coming around and adding more value to each one of them and softening out. You'll find that you have your own way of doing things. There's not one right way. Someone that does rocks another way, that's theirs. I always am more for the education. I want the outcome, but I'm really more about the education than the actual outcome, because if I get the education, that goes with me to the next painting. I'm liking that. In fact, some of those areas, I'm going to get a little darker. Because remember, all this lightens up as you work. Get another one up here. I'll pull this up here in a minute. You can see what I've been doing. But I want you to see the whole effect as I'm working on it. I'm going to come back around this a little bit. Okay, they're all getting a little more shape. So if every single one of these little guys, you gave some place on it, a dark, a spread out of mid-tone, and we'll do the light here later, but if you do a light, middle, dark on each one of these, you'll get the feel of the texture. It's just kind of cool. What I'm going to do is, remember we talked about I was going to come back on with some more splotters onto the background with a toothbrush after it was dry. So this is all wet, but the background is dry now. So to save us a little time, I can do that next. So let me show you how this is starting to work. See? I've got a little brown one there. Don't worry about it. I'll come back to that. All right. So I'm going to take the toothbrush. This is all dry now. So I'm going to get the toothbrush. It's going to be a little, not thick paint, but a little not as juicy. And I'm going to hold it down, bring it towards me. And I am going to randomly, strategically random, of course, I'm going to give some thought to where I'm coming in with some of those little splotters. I'll bring it up and let you see that here. You can even hear it. And that added quite a lot, and you can even see some of those got into the rocks. So now it's dry time again, and I will come into the next part of having this be a special area, and then these would support that. So you can see now we've got more action going on. We've exaggerated some things, what I like exaggerating. And I'm going to talk about how I'm going to do this area to have a little more emphasis. And like I said, it's kind of 1/3 this way, and to make it a really nice 1/3, 2/3, this is almost middle, so I'm going to put some more of it that way. So the color I'm using on top of where we've done the Payne's Gray and the Lunar Black, and we did a little bit of the Moon Glow in there way back. I'm going to take a little bit of quinacridone rust. That is an M. Graham color, and I am going to bring in a couple little areas here to, again, bring your eye down into this section. And I'm just doing parts of it, and you're going to see what I've already done with that dark. The layer of this coming over gave me some of those little values underneath already. And then I'm just going to take a little bit of my Payne's Gray and drop back. Actually, let me go Lunar Black. The Lunar Black would give me just a tiny bit more granulation. And I can come back in. So I'm actually tipping in between. There's the brown again, not the quinacridone rust. We know from the lessons we've done before, quinacridone rust does not granulate, but we've made it appear granulation by having it be with the others as a glaze or a layer over. I like that. So I'm going to come over one more rock up here, just lightly with the quinacridone rust, so that you have kind of this area. And I'm actually going to take and lighten with a little bit of a tissue right there. It'll lighten up too, but I want to keep it just in this area so that I've got a variation going on. So let's lighten that up. So it kind of comes in this little curved area. So you can see I actually took it off of that side and just put it on this side so I stay more curved. Then I'm going to take a little bit of this quinacridone rust and just very lightly come around a couple places just to give some continuity to the painting of having a little bit of a warmth through. So I'm not going to put it everywhere because then I lose the variety. I want to have it just a little bit. I'll take a little bit up here to the corner. Where you remember where I lightened that area? I did that thinking I would probably come up here with a little bit of tone. Now I've got you meandering because I think pretty carefully about where I want you to go in a painting, where I want to travel you. So while that's wet, I'm going to come in and just drop in a little bit of the Payne's Gray. You could do any of the grays or the browns we've been working with, but just drop in a little bit so that we have a little bit of variety in its value again. I don't want it to come off the edge a lot, so I'm not going to come to the edge as much as coming down inside here. I think I'll do a little bit here too. Make it jagged there. I like that jagged look. And then while this is happening, I'm going to take my liner brush, the little tiny thin liner brush. I'm going to load it. When I load it, I side load it so it's fully loaded side, not like this, but to the side, fully loaded. And I am going to add some cracks. So like there's a crack that goes along here. I'm going to add some. So I think there's a nice little spot here to kind of add one. And when I do that, I'm going to skip so that I don't keep it going continuous. You can barely see it there. And I'm also going to wet it so that it flares out a little bit. So it feels like it's kind of just very minutely there. And I think I want to do one here. So these are just choices. They're not in the photograph at all. But if I want to travel you somewhere, I might do it with little lines. And again, I'm softening those. You can keep them hard, soft. I just want to do a few more little cracks because that's what this is. This is all cracked up. So we're going to have it be more cracked than it shows. Maybe this crack actually comes through and comes all the way through. You can look at some of my Yellowstone paintings that are the copyright ones that are over on my website, and you can see that I added cracks in different areas, kind of right on this same idea. All right, so now I've got you coming through here. I'm having you stay here a little bit. I'm having you wild off. I'm moving you pretty strategically through the piece, and yet, keeping some interest to them being the little different shapes. So I'm coming now and just doing some little touches where I might want it a little bit darker where it lightened up, maybe a little darker here. You can overdo these pretty quick, especially when you're talking the whole time, which you would not be doing. Let's go a little darker down in here. And then I think we're looking pretty good. So let me think, what do I want to do? I'm going to put just a little bit more. This is the one I want you to look at. So I gave just a little bit more of the quinacridone rust, a little brighter. That's the one I want you to look at, and then I want you to fall down into here. So you can see I purposely put you there. Now some of these, see how we've really got the essence of that look, but in a more interpreted way. What I generally do is when I'm doing finishing touches, I usually set this aside and study it for a couple days. Give some more thought to what I might want to do. Let's put a little crack through here where I just wet it. So where I just wet it, it'll flare out a little bit. So I have taken the painting off of the board, cut it off with an X-Acto knife, took off the drafting tape. You can see that leaves a really nice white edge for my framing it, and signed it. So I got my signature on there. And in looking at the two of these, the interpretation of what I wanted to do, I'm really pleased. I think it's kind of fun to see where I took just a sidewalk crack and enhanced it and made it unique. And that's what I really like about art, are the things that you can do about finishing touches and taking something that you just were walking along and looked down and there it was, something that you had to render. So I hope you enjoy finding your own cracked sidewalk and doing one of these. Enjoy.